of these old days, one of these old days, and we won't stop. One of these old days, one of these old days.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Mike Ergo and I got Chris Albert with me from Warrior Soul Podcast. And as always, this is Transitions from War, and we are talking about reconnecting to mind, body, and spirit. And as we did in the past when we reviewed the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, Chris and I are teaming up to provide you guys with something a little better than just a rambling dude by himself just talking.
You get two rambling dudes by themselves just talking.
Yeah, twice the bullshit. So today we're going to talk a little bit about meditation. And like we were talking about earlier, neither one of us are meditation gurus. Neither one of us have a specific practice or maybe big tying it into a big spiritual practice. And we wanted to talk about some of the practical ways meditation works in our lives, maybe what we think is bullshit, maybe what we think works, and kind of dispel maybe some of the rumors. I mean, meditation and mindfulness are big buzzwords now, but I don't think they really get defined ever. What do you think about that, Chris?
They're buzzwords right now, and I think there's a lot of people who are throwing them out there all the time. You know, it's kind of become like a thing to meditate now. And you know, for people in our community, when something becomes a thing, that's exactly when you want to back away from it and throw gasoline on it and light it on fire, right?
Oh, but, yeah, exactly. Gluten-free is a good example of that, right?
Right, exactly. So, but it's definitely, it's something that I doubted for a long time, but I definitely find it helpful. And it's definitely something that's helped me to really sort through my thoughts and, stop a lot of the bullshit that was going on in my own head.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think off the bat, I'm going to look at a couple of definitions and just so we can know what we're talking about off the bat. So there's the definition of mindfulness, and mindfulness is defined as the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. So mindfulness is simply just being aware on purpose, I guess, is a simple way of putting it. And then meditation, which, you know, is similar but not the same thing, is the practice of engaging in a mental exercise, such as concentration on one's breathing or repetition of a mantra, you know, a saying, a phrase you can say over and over, for the purpose of reaching a heightened level of spiritual awareness. So they're both pretty similar. So when one says, "Oh, I'm meditating," they're engaging in a practice to notice things or harness their focus. And there's a lot of different ways to meditate. There's ways where people visualize something in their mind. There's ways people just visualize or just have a mantra where there's something that they say over and over. Sometimes they just notice their thoughts.
Right. Yeah. And this is, I mean, a couple of things here. Number one, you know, why did mindfulness become a thing? Well, it's because a lot of people started noticing the scientific benefits of meditation without wanting to do the whole religious thing, a religious aspect of it. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just kind of creating a secular form of meditation. But, for those of you who might be wondering about it, you know, like prayer could also be a form of meditation. Like when you're sitting down, you're saying prayers and I'm a Catholic. So, in some ways saying the rosary could be considered a form of meditation because you're saying something over and over again. And you're right. Sitting there focusing on your beads and that's actually a form of meditation. But the big thing that really helped me was I guess it's a mindfulness idea that there shouldn't be any expectation from it, right? That there shouldn't be any expectation from it. And I think a lot of people think they're going to come into it and maybe I'll get high a little bit, and afterwards I'll feel absolutely amazing, and it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and those things do happen sometimes where there's specific kind of meditations or breathing techniques where you can feel pretty high, or I've even had one meditation where I had, a big life-changing epiphany. But that's one time out of, well, I've meditated a lot of times. I can't keep track anymore. But I guess, and I think I'll touch on that because it's worth talking about. But getting into it, like exactly what it is, and I was listening to someone called, there's heightened states and heightened traits, and so if you talk about a heightened state, that's where you get that kind of spiritual high where you feel really great and your outlook on life is pretty charged up. But then there's the trait of if you can meditate successfully for a while. Successfully is kind of an ambiguous term there, but if you're meditating for a while, you're going to notice some different traits in your life, some patience. Maybe you'll notice just these garbage thoughts that come in your head. And maybe you'll notice your reactions to different things, and notice that you have a choice and how long you want to stay angry, or how long you want to maybe feel like a victim, or sit in a bad mood. So you'll notice some of those choices there with moods. What kind of things have you noticed like that have made a big difference for you?
It's definitely that. Like, it's definitely that you have a choice whether you allow something to put you into a bad mood or not, and for how long. Grief is another one. So like if you feel grief, you can start to say, all right, well, I'm going to allow myself to feel grief for this amount of time, and it's a normal human pain that I have to go through, and I'm going to allow it. I'm going to allow it to happen right now, and then
exactly.
And you're more comfortable with it. You see it as something that's just there, rather than number one, trying to fight it. Number two, allowing it to invade every aspect of your life for years on because you haven't dealt with it. Right.
That's a good point. That's so good point. Because like if you're allowing these feelings to show up, then you're allowing yourself to fully feel them. Whereas maybe in just regular state of being, going about your day-to-day life, if something comes up and it's uncomfortable, we're usually going to resist feeling the full force of it. And it just it never gets felt and dealt with. And so then it just invades all parts of your life. It's a feeling of being stuck.
If it's not dealt with, it definitely could too, right? It's like a little demon that sits below the surface, and it's just like, hey, it's ready to come out at any time. And if you don't deal with it, then it definitely could. The other thing that's really helped me with is, a lot of times when I was younger, I would get into verbal altercations with a loved one and just kind of lose control. And now, if I'm starting to get into a verbal altercation with the woman, I hope she's not listening to this, but if that happens, it helps me to remain calm and kind of, retreat and live to fight another day. But exactly. You don't dive head first into these verbal altercations like some people do.
And that's a great point, because without that kind of awareness, when someone challenges me or challenges us, then it seems like that fight or that disagreement can be that life or death thing. And for anyone who's experienced, difficult stuff, trauma, stuff that sticks in the body there, a lot of times we bring that past stuff into our current relationships, into our current situation. Yeah. And so with that kind of awareness that you can get from meditating or being mindful, and can help you realize, oh, this is some leftover stuff. Oh wow, that's Mike from a younger age, and this person is keying in on something that's pretty old. And when I realize that, maybe I still feel pissed off, or I still feel whatever uncomfortable feeling is there, but I have just enough space to see it. I'm not immersed in it. I can step back and see the battlefield right there. I think Jocko and not the dichotomy of leadership, but extreme ownership talked about that a little bit.
Detachment.
Yeah, detachment, and also the ability for a leader to step back and see the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're on the front lines right there and you're in it, immersed in it, it's hard to see the bigger picture. But if you can step back and get that commander's view, then you can see how to move parts around.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's in all parts of your life too, because and that's the big thing that meditation's helped me to really take a look at, is like, because as an entrepreneur, one of the things I'm doing every day is I'm trying to decide what to do. And it's real easy to get caught up in like the little things, like, okay, I need to make I need to work on my podcast sound engineering for the next 3 hours to make it perfect. Or, okay, I need to work on this or that. There's any number of like 1,000 things I could work on. But unless I'm able to take a step back and really like decide what's important and the direction I want to go.
Yeah, exactly.
In a while. And with meditation, that's what really helps you to decide what's important, what part of my brain am I thinking with? Am I thinking with my monkey brain right now? Am I doing this because I'm doing it out of fear, or am I doing it to move myself forward?
What I noticed, and noticing my motivations, and that I'm glad you brought that up, is I noticed when I started really being mindful of and tracking, like when I ate, and meditating just in general, spending 20 to 30 minutes a day meditating. I started noticing that when I got nervous or when I got kind of amped up, I'd always go for like a handful of food. And it wasn't because I was hungry. It was because that was a way to kind of soothe myself or try to, in an attempt to relax. Mm-hmm. And even though I wasn't like eating unhealthy stuff, I was grabbing a handful of mixed nuts here and there, or just different kinds of foods. It all added up, and I could see like, oh, I'm not doing this because I'm hungry. What if maybe there's a different choice? Like, if I'm not hungry, what other things can I do to help myself calm down a little bit that doesn't, have a huge caloric implication there?
Yeah, there's a huge caloric implication, and a lot of people don't know this, but there's a huge inflammation implication too, because if you eat while you're stressed, there's definitely damage that could occur to your digestive tract, and that could lead to a whole host of different issues. So yeah, that's causing like a negative downturn, big negative downturn there. But with meditation itself, so how do you do it? What is your technique for doing it?
It is to find a quiet spot as best I can and sit down, and sometimes lay down, but if I'm tired, I'm just going to sit so I don't fall asleep. Mm-hmm. And just check in with my body at first, so I'll start breathing, and I'll aim to breathe from my diaphragm, from my belly. And so if I'm breathing out or breathing in, my belly is coming out and expanding. And as I'm breathing out, the belly retracts. And I try to just do steady breaths. I don't want to force anything. I don't want to make it super long or short, but just kind of start noticing that, just the feeling of the breath right there. And then once I started noticing the feeling of the breath, I'll do a brief check-in, and I'll, from my head down to my toes, and I'll see if there's anything that's, flexed or tense that I can relax just a little bit. And then I'll notice the thoughts that come up. And, like you talked about from the monkey mind, which is just the part of our mind that just brings thoughts and chatter and stuff. And I won't try to block them out or clear my mind. I'll just see if I can notice those thoughts and say, okay, I see you. And almost like a cloud passing in the background, I'll just notice it, then let go, and then come back to my breathing. And so I'm not pushing away any thoughts. and I'm not trying to hold on to anything. And the same with feelings. When emotions show up, like I think about the person, who I'm pissed off at, in X situation, then I'll notice where in my body I have that feeling, what that sensation's like, or if it's fear or dread, like I'll usually notice that in my gut. If it's happiness, I'll notice that as a kind of a warm feeling in my heart, but I'll just try to notice that feeling without analyzing it, and then come back to the breath.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm, when I do it, so I had a gentleman on the podcast from the Warriors Ascent, probably 2-3 years ago, and we were talking about it because I was really interested in it. And he talked to me about meditation, and I was having a real hard time with it at the time because I tried everything, like to just try to get into it. And he said, if you want to meditate, start with this. He said, close your eyes. Whenever a sensation comes over you, say that's a sensation, right? And then mentally put it out of your body. And then he said, whenever a feeling comes over you, say that's a feeling, mentally put it out of your body. And then keep doing that for 10, 15 minutes. And he said that was meditation. And so to this day, that's pretty much what I do.
That's cool.
I sit there and I'll say, all right, that's a feeling, put it out. That's a sensation, put it out. And I've focused on my breathing at different points, but mostly it's that mental exercise while I'm doing it, trying to just keep it on that.
It's focused awareness. You're noticing your body, you're noticing your mind.
Right.
That's I think what all meditation comes down to is taking your mental faculties or your mind and focusing it with intention on something.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And I think that helped me out a lot. And I think for the guys at home who are just getting into it, that's a good way to start. And like you start kind of like with what Mike just said, you focus on each part of your body for a little bit. That's a good mental exercise, I think, to get into it. Like you focus just on your big toe, and then just on, your second toe, and then just on your third toe, and then focus on the middle of your foot, and focus on your Achilles heel, and all these different parts of your body. And then as you get into it, after you go all the way up to your head, then just sit there and start, saying, hey, that's a feeling. That's a pain.
Right. And like when you said, oh, that's a feeling, you're giving yourself just a little bit of distance from it. And so when someone's overwhelmed, it's like they're drowning in that feeling and that sensation. And so if you can say just that small thing, like you said, is such a huge difference. Oh, that is a feeling. And then so just by doing that, there's this way you separate yourself from that. So, that's not the totality of my experience. The body is feeling grief, or the body is feeling anger. And so you said, okay, so there's a little bit of separation there. And it's one thing out of many things. It's like when I had this, I have this friend, Steve, he's a firefighter, and he got me into GoRuck. And so we do these GoRuck challenges. You're, basically carrying heavy shit around. Or we did the heavy, so it's 24 hours, and I was getting some doubts in it. And he gave me a couple great insights. He said, one of the things he does, we're talking about mindfulness now, which is, a way you can apply these techniques without sitting down. You can apply them in, while you're running, while you're have your eyes open. He said, he does a lot of ultras, so 30, 50 milers, and he said when his knees start to hurt, he says, okay, he recognizes that, but then he finds a part of his body that just feels neutral, even if it doesn't feel great, And so he said his go-to thing is just to focus his awareness on his earlobe. And so he notices that, because rarely, unless you're really sunburned or, getting the shit slapped out of you, like, I don't know, and wrestling or jiu-jitsu, then your earlobe is probably going to feel okay. Right. And so if he focuses his awareness on that, and says, okay, yeah, my knees, it's essentially acknowledging that my knees hurt. Sure. But that's not everything that's going on. This is a part of my body that I notice is doing just fine.
Right.
And so he says he notices that, and then I helps him notice maybe the scenery around him, which is usually pretty nice because he runs a lot of trails. And so he focuses awareness on the other stuff that's happening too. So it's not that one thing just is magnified.
That's one thing I noticed, like even back when I was doing humps in the Marine Corps, and I consider running actually a form of meditation too, because it just helps me to like really clear my mind and kind of sort my thoughts out. But like like yesterday, I was doing a run, and it had been rainy like the few days before, and then I look up yesterday and I'm running and I look at the mountains and they're snow capped and I see the trees and it's beautiful out there, and you got the blue sky. And even back in the day when I was in the Marines and I was doing humps, a lot of times I'd look around like that, my back would be hurting, my knees would be hurting, my ass would be hurting. A hump is probably the most horrible, ergonomic condition you could be in. But
yeah.
But I'd look around and I'd be like, wow, it's beautiful out here. You know what I mean? And that would help me stay in it.
Yeah. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking of like my first hump. It's that 5 miler in boot camp. And you go along the beach. You remember that one?
You were in San Diego, right? I was out in Paris Island. So they did.
Right.
Yeah, they do a few of them there. So back when I went through boot camp, they had they had a 1 miler, they had a 3 miler. No, they had a 3 miler. Then they went up to a 5 miler. Then they went up to it was a 10 miler, I think. I forgot what the biggest one we did was in the Crucible.
Yeah, I think exactly, and that's the big long one. I think we did like a 3, 5, and 10, and then SOI was like a 5, 10, 20.
Yeah, 5, 10, 20. We did the 20 miler was a big one in SOI. But I remember in boot camp, like boot camp was so pre-programmed and everything like that. I remember like the humps are like, we didn't even know we were going on a hump. They were like, just get your gear, get everything over, keep your rifle on your shoulder, move forward. Yeah. And we didn't even know we were going on humps. Like I thought it was just another thing,
I'm laughing. Just one of these random memories is so I'm on this whatever it's 3 or 5 mile hump, and we're going along the beach, off Camp Pendleton. Beautiful, right? So I'm noticing the scenery, and that's putting me in this great mood. And there's dolphins jumping, and that's awesome. And then all of a sudden, I look down to my right on the beach there, and there's this spring-loaded dildo that I think had washed up back on shore, and I was like, "What the fuck?" But it's such an interesting thing to notice from like this beautiful scenery and dolphins jumping to seeing that. I'm like, well, this is happening too. So that's there. I tell you what, it kept my mind off of, my back hurting and everything else going on. I think another form of meditation that I found beneficial too is consciously harnessing a state of good feelings or gratitude. I think, and this is a one that there's a guy named Rick Hanson who wrote a book called Hardwiring Happiness. So he's in this awesome cross section of someone who's a neuroscientist, and he meditates very regularly. So he's not just one of those, gray ponytail yoga pants guys. He talked about the benefit of consciously recalling and to the detail as much as you can, the sight, sound, smells of a really great experience where a person you really love, and the way that changes, your body chemistry, and the way that changes and puts you in a state of gratitude, which is another buzzword, which I'm starting to hate now because everyone uses it. But you can feel your body loosening up. You can feel your body just feeling good. And he says that there's no difference in the brain between this state of imagination, of consciously putting this in your mind and creating it, and actually having the experience. And so your body's getting the same benefits there. And it's one of those things where if you can do that, what ties this all together is that doesn't matter if you're doing this while you're running, while you're swimming, while you're sitting down or walking, that you are putting your body in, if you can do this successfully, you're putting your body in that rest and digest parasympathetic, nervous system state where you're letting your body kind of recover and you're letting your body kind of relax. I mean, I guess that's not going to apply if you're doing a sprint run, but you're really helping your body kind of decrease how it's being amped up and letting your body get into the part where it can repair.
I need to try to do that this morning after jiu-jitsu, man. My body's torn up right now. But yeah, no, I definitely see that. Like just trying to put yourself back there and trying to, and I can't stand the fact that gratitude's become a buzzword either. Like but it is one of the things that's helped me out so much. You know what I mean? Yeah. But everybody's like, man, why do they do that with everything that's good, Mike? Why do they do that with everything that's good? Everything becomes a product, right?
That's how I felt about Green Day back in, I think, 94. It was one of the first bands I really started liking. And then all of a sudden, everyone I hated started listening to it too. And without being a complete hipster and be like, oh, I hate them now too. But it's something when it becomes a buzzword or something becomes trendy. You see all these, you see people, I think, use words like gratitude in a very glib way or a very surface shallow way. And it can cheapen maybe the word or cheapen people's understanding of it.
Right. And
I'm so grateful.
I'm so grateful. I've got so much gratitude. I want to show you my gratitude right now. I'm going to talk about my gratitude, and I'm going to start everything with gratitude. But yeah, and I think it backs people off, and especially, like I said, from our community, when we start to notice stuff like that, we're like, what the fuck is this? Who do I have to kill right now? That kind of shit. And it's like, I don't know, a few years ago, because I've been in, the HEP, and I'm saying this and I'm listening to the words about to come out my mouth, but I was in the health and holistic healing community for a while. Right.
Oh, holistic's another one, right?
Yeah. Holistic. And I went to a conference that was put off by an author that I talked about just prior to us hitting record. And it rhymes with Hullet Roof. And I went down to that conference, and because I'm interested in that stuff, I want to learn about the biohacking things. I want to learn about how I can live to 150 and how I can help other people too as well. So I get down there and I get to this conference center, and it's in Southern California, and there's a bunch of guys outside in their shorts, oiling themselves up with coconut oil, doing a sun sauna. And then I come inside and like everybody's walking around in barefoot, like around downtown Pasadena. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man.
And for everyone listening, just both of our faces are in this big cringe right now. Like, oh,
yeah. And I'm like, and I'm watching these guys who call themselves biohackers, and some of them are overweight, definitely out of shape, and some of them are, not, they're not, definitely not living up to what they're telling everybody, and it just kind of pisses me off,
Yes, exactly. Because I think vets have a pretty good bullshit detector. In fact, maybe we expect something to be bullshit. So in any little thing right there, all of a sudden it's like, if you see one guy say who's like that, then you're like, oh, the whole thing is bullshit. So,
right.
And yeah, exactly. That there's something about that where the weird kind of like fake stuff just comes into play, and it really makes something cool like meditation or anything,
right?
It just seem like just some trendy bullshit, and you're like, let me get as far away from that as possible.
Yeah, or as far away from those people as possible, because yeah, it's just like the thing is, I think, because I think vets in some ways they make the perfect coaches. Like for those of you out there who are thinking about becoming fitness coaches or things like that, I think a lot of you would be perfect at it because you've worked with so many people and different types of people, and you know how people think, right?
Yeah.
And that's what particularly like infantry guys, you know what I mean? Because you work with such a variety of personalities in the infantry. But but I think that a lot of times so many of them are just scared to do it because you've got to go and you got to network with a bunch of bozos sometimes, you know.
The talking about the weird, pseudo spiritual people reminds me something that I think is a big barrier to people trying out something like meditation is the fear that if you do this, the goal is to turn you into a complete pussy. And yeah, and it's a well-founded fear because the biggest people who are in this in meditation, maybe are maybe fallen into that camp more often than not. But the thing is that if you can meditate or do some deep breathing, you're able to decide when you want to apply your resources to be able to use aggression or to fight when it suits you, and when you want to use other tactics in situations when fighting doesn't suit you. And so you don't have just one card, you don't have just one play. So it's helped me, if I don't want to yell at people, which is I'd say 99% of the time, it helps me decide, okay, which tool do I want to employ here? Do I want to go yelling and aggressive, or do I want to try to rationalize with someone, or do I want to walk away from the situation? It helps me step back right there, so I'm not baited in just by feeling crappy.
Right, and that's a big thing to understand too. It's definitely like. I think meditation goes far back in the warrior community. I mean, you can go and you can look at Sun Tzu's writing, and from the Art of War.
Yeah.
He says, the biggest thing is to know your enemy and to know yourself. Right? If you know your enemy and you know yourself, you won't be defeated in 1,000 battles. Right? And I think that's a big part of this is just knowing yourself. Right? Knowing how you're going to react, knowing what you're going to do.
Exactly. And if you can know yourself, it has a tactical advantage too, because if you're thinking that way, whether it's, actual combat or you're dealing with people who might try to manipulate you, they know your patterns if they know you. And so if you want to act and be proactive instead of reactive, then this is a way you can do that. So, for example, maybe I have someone in my office who will say things to bait me into an argument, and in so doing, they might get something they want out of it, either to make me look bad or get something they want. So instead of just reacting and falling into that trap and giving my power away, then I can say, oh, okay, what is the bigger picture here? What is happening? Will this be an advantage to me? And I have just enough space to do that. So another thing too is mindfulness and like in the situation, because, if you're in a situation, obviously you can't engage in meditation and sit there for most of them. Right. And so what do you do when you're in the situation right there? And this is where mindfulness, the paying attention on purpose comes in handy. And so simply noticing your body, noticing the feelings you're having, and noticing your breath, and perhaps taking control of your breath by making your breath a little deeper. Because when we're stressed out, we tend to breathe just in our chest, shallow breaths, which then sends signals to our body to get amped up even more. And so if you're in a situation where you're in an argument or you're in a heated conversation, or it's just stressful, like, for example, I have a 2-year-old and I love him and he's a maniac. And he runs around the house just dumping shit out, and he's got a great arm, so he's just like throwing basketballs and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, yeah. And so I can say, okay, not going to sit down and meditate. I'll get hit with a basketball in the face. I'm just gonna take a few deep breaths and say, okay, what's gonna help me right here? And take a few conscious deep breaths and hopefully lower that pulse, lower that blood pressure enough to where, my conscious, my prefrontal cortex, my rational brain can have a little more thinking power. And that's another thing we didn't talk about yet. But when you meditate, if someone is in a reactive state and you're just being driven by that limbic system in your brain that just has that reaction, that feeling, if we get really stressed, the higher our pulse goes, the higher our blood pressure goes, the less brain power we have in our cortex to actually think and make a good decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're really just thinking with your reptile brain, right?
And you're just reacting.
Right. That's what takes over. Yeah, that's interesting and you can notice that, like, because I was doing jujitsu last night, and it's the first time my girlfriend ever did jujitsu, right? And so whenever it's her first time, they tend to fight like a wild animal, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. You're just, exactly. It's because it's primal, right? Because you're scared.
Right. They're just going nuts trying to do everything. She tried to do like a WWE move on my head, and like, because the coach had us go against each other, which was a mistake. She wanted to, she tried to kill me. She straight tried to kill me. So I'm like trying to remain calm. She's like, because she's like a little spider monkey. Yeah. And what's it called? But you notice that people their first day, the white belts, they'll come in, and you're less likely to get injured by like a black belt in jiu-jitsu than you are by a wild ass white belt.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And it's interesting to watch people, because the more they do it, the more they're calm, the more they control their breathing. But the new guys are like, wow, like just breathing all heavy and like trying to muscle everything and do that,
Yeah, like way less technique, way more just muscling things out and trying to like, fight their way through it that way.
Right.
Yeah. So it's so interesting that when I can do this, I can notice, oh, okay, I'm starting to pace back and forth, or I'm starting to look off in the, in a corner and just kind of like, block out whatever is in front of me that's bothering me. So I can start to notice these things and have a little more of a choice, which is always an advantage. Always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's it? How do you deal with stress right before a race? Because I imagine like, you're doing like Kona or something like that. Like you're in the gate right before you gotta head out. Yeah. You probably got like a million things going through your head, and you're trying to figure everything out, and you're trying to. And particularly with your sport, triathlon, there's so much prep that's got to go into it. You got to make sure your gear's staged, your bike's all tuned up and stuff like that. So how do you handle that?
I think the days leading up to it are probably the most anxiety provoking. Mm-hmm. Not as much anymore as they were back then when it was still like the big unknown, like, but incorporating just breathing, because stress can take over before you know it. I mean, a lot of us don't notice this stress or angst or anxiety before it really gets to such a level that we're doing things that's like it's very apparent. But so a couple days before, I'll do a lot of stretching, because stretching for me not only is it great for range of motion and it prevents injury, but stretching really helps me get out of the monkey mind and feel, okay, if I'm stretching my hamstrings, I can really feel that. And then that helps me kind of place my mind in my body there and get out of the chatter. And so as I'm doing that and I'm doing my preparation, I'll do it a little bit slower and with just a little bit more intention, because that helps me just to slow down. And that's what I need. I need to slow down, because I don't want to get in that fight or flight, reactive mode where I'm stressing out. So I don't want to pack things up really quickly. I want to do it a little slower. So I send the signal to my body to relax, if I was hyping up for a fight or something that was like, a brief thing, maybe I do things differently. I get myself amped up. But for this, I want to maintain the lowest heart rate possible, that sweet spot. You know, I want to stay
Right.
the lowest heart rate possible, to still, you know, have the output of power that I need and strength, because I'm going to be doing it for like 12 hours. And so then
Yeah.
the day of, a few days before, I start thinking, you know, of my why, like, why am I doing this, and really connect to that purpose. Because once I do that, then I can see, okay, there's like, for me, it's to honor, you know, my fallen friends and honor Gold Star families. And so once I do that, it puts things in perspective. It gives me that perspective where I can step back and say, okay, yeah, I'll get tired. I mean, is that really anything to get nervous about? No,
Mm-hmm.
I've been tired before.
Right.
This is important, you know, and it helps focus my awareness on that. And then day of, same thing. I'll do some breathing there. I'll smile a lot and talk to people, and then just spend a few minutes just kind of breathing, just maybe mentally rehearsing a couple things, but just kind of like just being stoked about being there, just checking out the conditions and be like, I get to race. This is awesome. I get to be
That's
here
awesome.
like right now in this moment.
Yeah, that's very cool, and it's very cool that you're able to do that, because I think about that kind of stuff a lot, just because I admire your sport a lot, triathlon, and I admire like ultra marathoners and things like that. But I'm always like, I can't imagine what that last 20. Same thing with UFC fighters. I can't imagine what that last 24 hours must be like before a fight.
Oh,
Like, you gotta be insane for that last little bit, right?
That's what I have that same feeling about fights when I'm watching them, you know, like, you know, in the room where they're getting taped up and they're like, you know, maybe hitting a bag or some pads. And I'm just like, I'm getting nervous for them.
Right. Or like, but then you watch, like, you ever see like old films of Fedor Emelianenko? You ever see him? Oh my God. Like, you got to Google him and like watch videos of him.
Yeah.
He was a Russian guy. He does the thing that was scary about him. It looks like your dad's coming out.
Yeah.
He wasn't like jacked. He had like a dad bod. He's kind of bald. He looks like this like, he looks like somebody's dad, like literally he looks like some guy you could see rolling around with like khakis and like a collared polo shirt, like who's gonna come and help you with your email at work because it's not working. Right. But the dude would come out and he'd be like cold, calm, like completely calm, like not like he looks like he just woke up from a nap. And then the guy he'll go out there, and then when the bell rings, he turns into a freaking savage and like just starts mauling people and like hitting people in the face. And then like he was a sambo expert, so he tossed people, and like this dude was complete like Russian psycho, but looked like I said, he looked like your dad. Like
that's awesome. That's there's something to be said too. It's like that's even scarier, right? The person who has that focus and tension, like in the heat of the battle, like or when you're confronting with someone, it's like the person who maybe yells and like kind of, I don't know, peacocks is maybe a good term, and bluffs or presents a lot. Okay, maybe that can be startling, but the person who you see who just shows up, who's ready to do some damage, who's completely calm about it, you're like, okay, this guy has focus and intention. Like there's something here. I was thinking too, I alluded to it earlier about the pre, like getting ready for a race. And so I was getting ready for, again, this Go Rock Heavy. And I'd done a couple of these events before. And so probably a lot of our listeners are familiar with them, but you put on a pack, you got 40 pounds in there, plus your water and food. And you hump around, you know, with this pack, you know, doing fireman carries, carrying logs, jumping in the water, and doing stuff as a team. And I was getting amped up. I was having these big, like almost panic attacks, like getting ready for this. And you know, this is something that, okay, it's not like as easy as maybe running a 5K, but it doesn't really warrant that level of panic that I was bringing to it. And the one really big epiphany I've had while I was meditating, I was getting ready for this big Go Rock Heavy, this 24-hour thing. And I had this epiphany that said, oh, all this being amped up and stuff, my body's preparing to go like on a mission. My body's preparing to go back into combat. I'm packing up my gear and all this stuff. And then, oh, this is leftover war stuff. This anxiety isn't about GoRuck. This anxiety is left over from combat. And once I had that realization, it's like, oh, okay. This doesn't mean that this is a scary thing that warrants this much. And so it stopped ramping up and spiraling up. It's like, it's okay to be a little bit nervous about something you care about, or it makes sense that, someone who's, was diagnosed with PTSD, that my body would have this reaction. And once I had that, I was like, oh, cool. And it stopped that level of fear right there. I could say, okay, I can go into this now. And it was like the single moment I can point to, the biggest single moment I've had where that stress just dropped. And then I was like, okay, I'll get fucking tired. What's the big deal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting note. I had that anxiety for years around traveling. Like anytime I pack up, like I felt like I was back with my gear list, trying to get everything together, trying to, get my sea bag together, trying to get all this stuff. And every time I'd travel back then, that means, or anytime I was doing that, that meant that I was going to be separated from somebody who I loved. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I always associated traveling with that pain of being separated. It's crazy.
And you might not notice that in the front of your mind. And I say in the front of your mind, like, oh, this is going to suck, or I'm feeling this way because of this. A lot of times we don't make those connections. We're just in that emotional state, and other people notice it before us. And that's the advantage of meditation, is to be aware of what's going on, so it's not a primary driver if we don't want it to be.
Let me ask you this: you were with your wife while you were in the Marine Corps, right?
Yeah, in between my first and second deployment, we started dating.
Right, because most of the people I'm around, everybody I'm around right now are people who never knew me back then, like who never knew me during that time period. And even my girlfriend never knew me that back then. Like we didn't meet till years later after I got out. But it's interesting because like, I think that a lot of my behaviors are just so interesting to them. And if they had known me back when I was in, like, they wouldn't be as strange. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Like, what are the specific things people notice that they wonder about?
So when I go to sleep, like, I always like, my bed is like my tent, and I stack so I always have my trousers folded up right next to my bed with my socks next to it so that I could find them in the dark. And then I have my what's it called? My top, my blouse next to it, not blouse, but like, shirt next to it. And then, so that's one aspect of it. And then, just like the little things like, getting like time spent in between. Like, I don't like doing small talk at all in between activities.
Yeah.
Right. Because I want to get on to the next thing as quickly as possible. And it's kind of like how it was back then. We wouldn't do a lot of small talk in between events. We would go from this, and then it was en route to that, and then it was en route to that. And that's one thing I really miss about being in the Marine Corps, is that, you were able to get so much done because, everything was like, all right, we are starting at this time, and then you've got to be there 15 minutes early. So you get there 15 minutes early, and then, but now time is like a variable thing in the civilian world.
It is. That's what I notice. I think one of the biggest things I notice with me and vets in general is that transition time can be really uncomfortable, because if you have a specific task, you can engage your mind in it, like, okay, like, we are eating right now. Okay. And then, okay, now I'm working, but there's time in between, like, say, like, you're waiting, like, for me, like, between, like, setting my bike up and then waiting for the race to start. Right. That in between time, that transition time is a lot harder, because you're not as grounded, or you're not as plugged into the moment. It's kind of an unknown floating feeling.
Right.
And,
Or like last night we were leaving the jiu-jitsu studio and I'm talking with a bunch of people, but as I'm talking to them, I'm like, and something's flashing in my mind, you're eating into your chow time, like eating into your chow time right now. So you got to get home, do a shower and make sure you're eating. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just strange. Sometimes I feel like it keeps me from being present while I'm talking with somebody because I'm constantly like thinking, all right, I got to look at the clock. I gotta go by the schedule. And I think a lot of people think it's strange. So.
Yeah. And that's something that's, been conditioned into us, especially Marines, we're probably the most heavily indoctrinated of the branches. Yeah. And, so the advantage to all this meditation and mindfulness stuff is we notice it. Okay, so there's an advantage to it because it can keep us on task. Like if we have a lot of things to do, that mindset. And then the advantage of meditation and mindfulness is that we notice that we could say, oh, okay, thought and feeling of needing to go. Like I recognize it. Is this an advantage for me to dwell on this right now? Or can I just let that kind of hang in the background and be in the moment as much as I can while saying, okay, I'm gotta leave soon or whatever the situation is. And so you get just maybe that much step back from it. I'd say with all this meditation stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think, and this is the thing for everybody at home. There is a choice here. And the choice is, the initial choice is this. Do you explore these things that I'm just going to keep going the way I am, right? Yeah. And what I don't want you to think is that if you accept kind of what Mike and I are talking about, is that I don't want you to think that it's going to change you or change who you are or anything like that. You're still going to be the same person. You're still going to have your same values and everything like that. It's just a matter of sorting through everything. And so the big choices you have are whether or not you're going to be, cool, calm, and collected, or whether you're going to allow yourself to move forward away from those anxieties and not let them rule you again. Sorry,
yeah,
can't exactly. Talk. Still early.
That was my biggest fear is getting into this. Am I going to start growing a ponytail and just dressing in like flowing robes? Or like, what is this going to do for me? And not the case. If you want to go that route, you definitely can, but it's, meditation is only going to improve how you want to be and make you a more effective version of that instead of being controlled by emotional states that come and go. So I've got a couple short meditations for people to try it out. And I've got some deeper guided meditations that I'll link to in the show notes as well. And I'll link to the article I published about a meditation challenge I'm involved in. That's awesome. Just kind of a community of people who are trying it out too, sharing their feelings and thoughts about it. There's a lot. And I think as we go forward too, if people are interested, we can put out some actual guided meditations, really short ones so people can just try it out for a second. It doesn't have to be half an hour, or even 10 minutes long. It can be a couple minutes just to get a little taste of like, okay, is this something I'd want to try out or not? Yeah,
we can do that. But you're going to have to guide them. I don't think I'd be very good at that.
Yeah, no worries, man.
I want you to bring your attention to your breath now.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Any save rounds?
No, man. I think I'm really enjoying doing this podcast with you. I think it's awesome. To everybody out there, I hope you're enjoying it as well. If you've got suggestions for a name for what Mike and I are doing, let us know. We had one suggestion come up last week. It was 2 Marines and a Mike. We got 2 mics, but yeah.
So my Marine mind just went back to 2 girls, 1 cup. I was like,
yeah,
that's exactly where when I was like, can I have that name without thinking of that So far, it's been impossible.
Two Marines and a mic. Yeah, that way. Yeah. Okay.
So years of meditation. So we'll keep the suggestions coming. We'll figure something out.
Awesome. All right. So I'll leave you to do the final notes, man. And I'll just say one last thing: spring-loaded dildo, and then favorite word of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, everybody. Until then, drink water, meditate, kill bodies.
Rah.